for January 26th. And per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, the public is not allowed to physically access the school committee meeting, but it can be viewed live using the Zoom link that's on our agenda and also streamed on channel 14. And then it'll be available as a recording on the school committee's YouTube channel following the meeting. Is there anyone who's making an audio or video recording of the meeting? Can you just raise your hand? I don't know if I can have the ability to. Okay. All right. If so, please notify me and I will notify the public as required by the open meeting law. So we'll start off with our mission and our vision. Bill, can you read it for us?
I think so. Thank you.
Thanks.
Falmouth Public School mission. The Falmouth Public School creates world-class student learning experiences. Our Clippers are empowered to pursue their goals with curiosity, integrity, and resiliency. Our vision. Clippers are creative, inquisitive, and engaged learners who participate in their community as socially responsible citizens. Clippers effectively communicate and solve problems that impact the world around them.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to start that way. So we'll start our meeting with public comment. Please limit comment to 2 minutes per individual, and there's no action or debate taken on public comment, but we're happy to hear you if you have anything that you would like to offer. Anyone have public comment for tonight? Just raise your hand and we'll make it so we can hear you. Okay. All right. So then we will jump right in. And if you noticed, on the agenda, we're a little bit out of order. Usually we start with COVID, but Scott McGann can't join us until a little bit later. I don't know why. It's not like he's busy or anything. So we're going to start with Falmouth Education Foundation and welcoming back Alan Jacobs. Where is he? Can we move him over? There he is. Alan, I think, oh, no, there you go. There we go. Great.
Hey.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I think I've met most everyone, but for those of you that I haven't met, I'm Alan Jacobs, and since July 1st, I've been the president of the Falmouth Education Foundation. So thank you for inviting me here. If you give me just a couple of minutes, let me update you, and then I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks.
I want to begin tonight, not about FEF, but speaking on behalf of the entire FEF board and as a parent of Falmouth High School student, I want to talk about and give you my and our sincere and profound gratitude and appreciation for the extraordinary work that everyone in the Falmouth Public Schools, the administration, the custodial, the cafeteria, the maintenance staffs, the bus drivers, and especially the nurses and the teachers, the work that you guys have done to keep our children safe while continuing to provide them with high quality education. It goes well beyond our expectations, and words can't express how grateful all of us are. So it's really an honor to be of whatever help that we can. So thank you very much. I also want to say how much all of us at FEF value the close relationships that we have been able to build with the Falmouth Public Schools over the years. Not just that you invite us to come before you every year and give you an update, but the fact that we can, and we do, have frank and honest conversations with Dr. Dorr, with Dr. Tellier, with the principals and the department heads about the big picture issues that the schools face and their dreams for where the schools can go. Conversations with teachers about changes they see in their classrooms, about ways and ideas that they have that they think can better meet the needs of the students. These are all so critical to our doing the best we can to support and enhance educational excellence in the schools, and we don't take the relationship for granted. I also want to thank and give my appreciation to Dr. Tellier for vetting all of the technology requests to ensure that they're in line with the district's technology plan. And I especially want to thank Lisa Krause for all her hard work in handling the grantees' orders. So obviously this past year has been, I don't know, I don't even have a word to describe it. But the close relationships that we've built have enabled us to really pivot sharply, to work with the grantees and to meet new and unanticipated needs. As the schools shifted to remote learning last spring, we worked with a lot of the project grantees to modify their awards. One example was Morse Pond librarian Liz Abbott's grant, bringing Morse Pond students beyond the Bright Sea. This was intended for every sixth grade student to class to visit Pennakees. And when half of the class's trips had to be canceled in the spring, we shifted funding and we sponsored a series of virtual field trips where a small team of adults traveled to Pennakees and interactively shared their experience of exploring the island in real-time online classes. When it became clear that the school closures would be long-term, we approached Superintendent Dorr and we asked how could we help? Outside of our normal grant pathways, what could we do to meet the district's challenges? Dr. Dorr told us that she was most concerned about the effect that the school's closure was having on its younger students. And so to meet this crisis, we responded with a $125,000 grant from the Emerging Fund that we had built over many years and provided Chromebooks, mobile Wi-Fi hotspot devices, and computer mice so that every student in the schools could have access to online programs and access to their teachers. There were also a number of project grants from last school year that weren't able to be completed. For example, Sarah Cox and Liz Lyle's Shakespeare and Company's work at Lawrence and FES, Caleb Peard's improvisational grants, Bob Porto's Bikes to Boards. So we work with all of these teachers and postpone their grants so that they will hopefully take place during the 21-22 school year next year. Despite the chaos of last spring, we received over 30 project grant applications for this school year. We wholly or partially funded every application, and we awarded over $111,000 in project grants. The pandemic didn't change the breadth and the scope of the projects. It didn't dampen teachers' dedication and enthusiasm. The projects represent a collaboration of over 80 teachers and involve every school and nearly every student in Falmouth. They continue a trend that we've seen for the last few years: cross-school, cross-grade, cross-discipline. They're really rich projects and they provide students with opportunities that are engaging and dynamic. Unfortunately, many of them have not been able to take place. Some because they included field trips, some because they brought visitors into the schools, some that just would have required students to be within acceptable social distance. So again, we work with the teachers and we postpone those particular grants. And again, they'll hopefully take place during the 21-22 school year. There is no danger in our taking the funding away from that at all. Some teachers have been really creative about making modifications which have enabled them to implement their grants. For example, Corinne Adams, rather than taking her students to artists' studios, purchased a GoPro camera, went out to the artist studio and brought the artist into her classroom. The VIPS college mentoring program that you may know about has gone forth over Zoom, and Krista Hennessy is going to be conducting her day of poetry virtually. As you also know, over the last few years, we've had what we call teacher opportunity grants, smaller grants for up to $300 for unexpected teaching and learning opportunities. Very short application forms. We turn them around within 2 weeks. When school started, before school started this year, we had more than a half dozen applications for those TOF grants. And within the first week of school, we had another half dozen. So we funded those and we funded a dozen more. But what also happened was our relationship with the teachers and administrators allowed us to better understand what the unique needs of the schools were this year. So we introduced a new grant program, just like that. Short application grants, forms. We call them access grants, and we turn them around quickly. The difference is, as opposed to the TOF grants, that these are larger. These can be up to $2,500, and they help with new learning models needed during the pandemic. So we've already awarded a dozen of those, totaling over $18,000. 3 that particularly caught my eye included a grant that we did for snowshoes for the physical education program at North Falmouth. Think about it. There's no indoor space for phys ed at North Falmouth. So this grant allows a meaningful opportunity for students to go outdoors and have cardiovascular exercise and experience in nature. Scara Cox and Daria Kasparian have written a grant that's going to make it possible for all 10th graders to remotely attend Mass Poetry Festival Student Day of Poetry. And Alyssa Guida and Ryan Weber wrote a grant to purchase par lights for the theater course at FHS, and they're going to be used when the theater club live streams its presentation of Clue, February 5th through 7th. The last thing I'll say is we were absolutely delighted to award our first Ellen Burrell student grants. These grants were initiated by 2 4th grade students, kids from totally different schools working together. They purchased t-shirts to help all of the remote learning 4th graders at all 4 elementary schools promote their remote community and remember this unusual 2021 school year. So again, on behalf of the FEF board, I want to thank everyone for the extraordinary job that you've done to keep our children safe while continuing to provide them with really high quality education. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to support the Falmouth Public Schools. So thank you very much. And I'm more than happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks so much, Alan. I'm sure there are comments and questions. Who wants first? Anyone have anything for
Be
Alan?
nice, everybody. Now be nice.
Melissa.
Well, you thank us, Alan. I feel like I personally, as I'm sure with a lot of everyone here, wants to thank you and FEF for everything that you do and what you've done, supporting us through the years, but especially during this terribly weird time that we're in right now. We're very lucky in Falmouth to have FEF, and that doesn't fall short on any of us. And we are very, very grateful. So thank you. Thank you for creating the quick and easy grant applications for the, the 2-week turnaround, $300, something fun comes up unexpectedly. Thanks for creating a whole new grant process during this time. Thanks for thinking outside the box and helping our students and our educators. Thanks for just always being there and supportive and thoughtful with everything you do. Thanks.
You're more than welcome, Melissa, and thank you guys for everything you're doing.
And I look forward to the next gala.
I know.
Unfortunately, it won't be this spring, but
I know.
Right.
but it will be back.
We will enjoy it all the more because we have to
will.
wait for
Look forward to
it.
seeing you there.
Any other comments for Alan? So I echo what Melissa said. It's just, we are really, really lucky, not just to be in Falmouth and have such the support from the community, but even above that to have FEF. And, there couldn't be a bigger year for, the whole idea of what doesn't fall within the regular budget. This entire year has been outside of the regular budget. So the fact that you were so quickly able to adapt to that and meet so many needs that would have just gone unmet. So, like you said, there are just no words, for how appreciative we are.
Thank you, Kelly.
And it's nice to have you still connected.
Yeah.
So thanks for taking it on.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Take
Thank you,
care.
Alan.
All right. Good night, everyone. Be well. Stay safe.
You too. So next up is budget priorities. Patrick, are you leading off, or Lori, who's starting us off?
So, well, both of us really. Ryan's going to bring the presentation up, and I'll introduce a couple slides, but Patrick's really going to take off on the meat and the potatoes of the presentation.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This is budget season. Time to share our process that we go through. Much is the same as we in a normal year, and then there's many elements that are quite different as well. So Ryan, and you can go on to the next one. Thank you. And the next one, we have several opening slides there. Okay, so as in any normal year, we look to our framework for student success, our strategic planning framework that will guide us in all aspects of our district, from the structure, the foundation, our academics, our social and emotional well-being for our students. So everything is in one framework, and we always look to see how we're doing, what we need to do to improve, and how can the budget support that process. In this year, supporting our schools in the pandemic has become an absolute priority when we look at the budget process. But it will continue to do that for at least 1 year, but probably predicting multi-years. Any year when we're looking at the budget, we look at several years at a time, and we have that forward look at least over the next 2 years coming. But this year, it is extremely important that we are looking at the next 2 years as there could be budget cuts. The amount of grants that are actually supporting us now, will they continue? So there's many things that we have to think about at this time. Ryan? So our current conditions, we would not be able to maintain our staffing levels that we have right now that are supporting our schools if it were not for the additional funds that we've received at the federal level. Enrollments anticipated to decline. As we have said every year, there is a 10% prediction year over year. But in the COVID times, parents have made some other choices. We certainly hope that the parents that maybe have kept home the preschool or the kindergarten students will return next year. Those that may have selected another educational opportunity will return. But we need to look at those, the enrollment overall. And certainly on the Cape, there's the economic downturn in any good year. Housing prices, continue to rise. But I think in the pandemic, we have extenuating circumstances with our economics downturn as well. This is our final year of collective bargaining. It is our most expensive year. So this is it actually drives much of the budget as well. And then we have typical staff retirements. We just have to look at which retirement positions are needed, or do we need different staffing for next year, and then the related cost with that. Ryan? Overarching guidelines. So we definitely want to sustain our progress from previous years. We also want forward progress. We always make sure that the principals are making some school-based decisions for supplies and materials that are needed within the in the schools. And we use data to absolutely drive the individual needs of students and the progress. So whether it's shifting reading supports, we may need additional reading teachers, we may need additional teaching assistants, special education teachers, depending on what the needs are, or it could be programmatic, right? As we see the needs, if our current programs aren't working, then we find what will work for kids. So we always look at the individual students' needs, and that's a part of the guiding process. And certainly in any year, but certainly this year, maintain the safe and healthy schools. And I just, and I think I said 10%, and I meant, a 1 to 3% decline. I don't know why I said 10%, but let me back up on that decline and just correct that for everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and we'll look at some trends and then where we are on our budget.
Ryan, slide. Thanks. So when we build a budget, we're talking about maintaining and sustaining the programming and the level of services that we have for next year. And whenever we do that, we analyze our programming in a district-wide or staffing at the school level, and of course, what are the student needs? You have to make sure we maximize the use of potential savings from retirements, any resignations or changes in how we're going to staff a school due to reduced enrollments. And then especially for next year, we have to maintain some flexibility in how we're going to leverage the federal funds that are available to us. Slide. So this is the enrollment by schools this year. Some of you who have been around for a little bit recognize that the overall enrollments at schools like Falmouth High School 5 or 6 years ago was closer to 900 students. Lawrence was closer to 600 students, those types of things. Well, that may be true, but one of the things that we need more than ever now is space. So the space that we have in our schools is at a premium, and it will continue to be at a premium going forward next year and I suspect the year after that. Slide. And this is a way to just take a look at the cohorts of students across the district, and a cohort of that we see in grade 10 of 240 or 240 to 260 was a typical cohort 5 or 6 years ago. The cohorts now are lower, as you can see across the grade levels. And that is maybe a function, a one-time function of parents choosing to homeschool or do private school, and then they may be coming back, or it may be a function of the local economy. We all know that it can be hard to make a living or make adequate wages in the region. But on the other side of this, we also are aware that if you own a house on Cape Cod, the value of that house probably went up 10% over the last year. Slide. So this is just an interesting slide that shows the historical trends in our budget and in enrollment. And this is really a slide that shows that the sustaining allocation from the town has been extraordinarily important to improving the schools over the last half dozen years or so. And this is extraordinarily important that we're going to be able to count on sustained revenue growth over the next year. So this is not something you see in every district across the Commonwealth. Slide. This slide speaks to the needs of children. The percentage of the district students on free and reduced lunch is another way of taking a snapshot of sort of the economic capacity of many of our families. Now, it is true that how the state and the federal government counted who is eligible for free and reduced lunch has changed. So in Massachusetts, if you are able to access other forms of state aid, and that can range from fuel assistance to mass health, you can automatically be eligible for free and reduced lunch. But the reality of that is that we all know the impact of the pandemic on people's employment across the region has been really a difficult challenge for a lot of families. Slide. So the next two slides describe the sources and uses of funds for this fiscal year. Now, the sources of funds are pretty straightforward. It's the local allocation. Now, what is not included in this pie chart or the next pie chart is it will probably be up to $1.7 to $1.8 million will come into the school district from federal grants. This would be including the CVRF grant and the ESSER grants, ESSER Phase 1 and ESSER Phase 2, that we'll use this year to handle our huge demand of temporary staff or substitutes or overtime support for in terms of custodial staffing. That amount, which it actually hasn't even shown up in the schools entirely yet, it has been vital to sustaining and making sure that our kids could actually come back into the buildings. Slide. This use of funds is really straightforward, and fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 20, this chart doesn't change. We use our funds for staff. 80, 81, 82, 83% of any funds that come into the district are used for staff. Slide. And slide. So when we look at creating our fiscal year 22 budget, we look at what are the realities and assumptions that we have to make. And as I mentioned, staff reallocation is an annual necessity, and it will continue to be a requirement. So based upon what the enrollment trends are estimated to be for September. Federal pandemic funds are not reoccurring, right? So so this is important to get out to our staff and to our community. Over time, and I want to be cautious about this, but over time, the staff that our temporary staff due to the pandemic are not going to be part of our local budget, or at least I should say the positions are not going to be part of our local budget. If we have people who migrate into different positions, they may become part of the local budget. But I just want to get it out there that over time, many of these temporary positions will need to go away. And that's just part of the planning, and it's nothing unique about Falmouth. Many districts will be doing the same thing. So focusing on the local budget, it will be critical in making sure that the staffing and the finances match up, not just next year, September through June, but the year after that. So we have to, management has to continue to do the hard work that is required every year. Slide. The other good reality, town funding increases have been reliable and sustaining. So that is huge. It's not always the case with cities and towns, but across the Commonwealth, but it has been for the last 6 years or so in Falmouth, and that is extraordinarily important. And you really can't maintain a high level of educational programs and services without reliable, predictable, sustainable funding. We're talking about a maintenance of services relative to the student enrollment for next year. We're not talking about new programs or staff. We're just making sure that kids come back to school and we get back to as normal a educational program as possible. One of the things that we are fortunate to have, and we will continue to be fortunate to use, is the school choice revenue. This revenue has been continuing to come into the school district. We treat this revenue it's much closer to a calendar year focus as opposed to a fiscal year. And the reason we do that is, one, we want to make sure what gets funded in the local budget. The second thing is just the way DESE handles the counting of children under school choice. It follows the calendar year. so we have better predictability when we follow a calendar year. So the decisions about the allocation of school choice revenue get made by administration through the superintendent sort of in that March timeframe, and nothing changes about that. We will continue to focus on using it on technology or technology refresh programs, which will be enhanced because we have a lot more technology in the school district, and curriculum refresh. Slide. Other assumptions. What is the enrollment going to look like next year? We expect a 1% to 2% reduction over the current enrollment. But that's similar to what the districts across the region are experiencing. Out of district tuitions, in any year, they fluctuate. What we're assuming for next year is that they could very well be very spiky. And what we are concerned about, and what we're beginning to talk about as a region, as a community, and as a region, is what is going to be the fallout or the outcomes of children who have some of the most significant challenges, who have not had a regular school experience, and how do we meet those children's needs, whether it's through cooperative programming, through the Cape Cod Collaborative or other collaboratives, or meeting the needs of the children in their own schools. We do not expect any significant changes in entitlement grants. That's Title 1, 2, 3, 4. Those grants will tend to follow enrollment trends and our school free and reduced lunch trends. Chapter 70. Excuse me. This is something that we've been watching very, very closely over the last 9 months. The news 9 months ago was suggesting a dramatic drop off in Chapter 70 funding to the towns, and that's part of the overall allocation to the schools. The most recent news is that the governor's budget would adequately fund Chapter 70 according to the Student Opportunity Act guidance. So that's good news for the town in terms of funding the schools, but it's still a little early. To tell. Typically, the state budget is a January through June exercise. Last year, it was a January through November exercise. So, or December, I should say, exercise. So, collective bargaining encompasses our largest budget item, and this year specifically is the largest driver of cost. Non-salary costs, COVID-related costs are actually becoming more predictable now. So those are not going to be in terms of the supplies and materials are not going to be a problematic at this point. Slide. So here's where we talk about the actual dollar amount. So what we will be asking, the school committee will be asked to approve a request for $51,514,729 for fiscal year 22, which is a 2.49% increase over the fiscal year 21 budget. So what does this mean? The conversations with Dr. Dorr and the town CFOs started September, October last year, and we were informed by the town CFO that her recommendation, given the information she had in front of her, was that she would be able to fund an increase at the department level of 1.5% across the board. That was relatively good news for for Dr. Dorr and I, and Dr. Dorr can confirm that I did not have a good poker face. I was actually excited by a 1.5% increase because we were concerned that it may be much lower or none or zero. But the overall costs of the school district go up by significantly more than 1.5%. So how do we get to that 2.49%? The idea, the strategy that was presented and discussed in the fall is still a good idea. But it can change if the CFO thinks it needs to change. What we're focusing on is just the revenue number. So a one-time drawdown of the sped stabilization fund that the town created, I believe it was 7 or 8 years ago, of $500,000 was the idea that was raised. It's something that is reasonable. Special education costs are always significant in the school district. So that was the strategy that was presented. Now, if the town revenues come in at a more aggressive rate than were predicted in September, if Chapter 70 comes in at a better rate than was predicted in September or October, maybe the sped stabilization fund does not have to be touched. As a school committee, what we're really focused on is that top line number. So if we can get to that 51,514, 729, and this town CFO determines that it's not necessarily to draw down the sped stabilization fund, I think that's great. If the expectation is that we should draw that down, then that's fine too. We can work with the town over time to try to build that back up over a number of years. I think we could come up with strategies, but what we're focused on is that number for an allocation from the town. How exactly it shows up can be determined by the town CFO, but we're pretty confident that that can be met. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Anybody have questions for Patrick? First of all, thanks, Patrick. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Even though it was my second time today, but
Yes,
the budget
yes.
subcommittee already got to hear it once.
We'll do it a couple more times.
That's all right. Leah, why don't you lead us off?
Thanks, Patrick. I have a question about free and reduced lunch. Now, we were able to offer free lunch to all students, right? And that was up until December 30th. And has that been extended? I guess that's the first question.
So bluntly, I don't care. We're giving children lunch, and as needed. So there is still some regulatory stuff that we have to pay attention to on this. But the community lunch program, it has been extended through the year.
Okay.
That's what you're talking about. Yeah, there's some hoops that are being jumped through, but.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah,
So because when we're looking at our Title I funding and we're looking at our other entitlement funds, free and reduced lunch, students, families who need free and reduced lunch are really essential in that number.
Right.
Now, when we're providing free lunch, are we still getting the documentation we need from families to ensure we have that data? Are they still required to fill out the paperwork?
Yeah, so what has changed over the past couple of years is what's called the pre-certification or direct certification is the language. So instead of that enormous amount of paperwork that was done every year by school districts, that is done to some extent if you encourage families if they need to fill that out, but what it really is focused on is if a family receives any other state aid from Massachusetts, that can be range from transitional assistance, heating assistance, mass health, those kind of things. When we submit the names, it comes back as, yes, you are eligible because this is actually for geeks like myself is pretty cool. The state has integrated the databases across the various transitional assistance programs. And this is going to be geekier than ever, but the mass pandemic EBT cards that have been sent out to families in April, that got started in April, it was a huge behind the scenes effort to support families, especially our poorest families. Huge success. And that's just good government work.
So I have another follow-up question, because we do
Yep.
have families who are not getting other public charges due to status. It might be.
And they could sign up.
So they would still have to sign up for
Yeah.
the lunch
Yeah.
program.
Right.
So would we know that if everyone's getting free lunch? I guess that is my ultimate question.
So what the community lunch program does is just said we're not paying attention to this in terms of the collections and everything. What it's a disconnect. What I'm saying is the disconnect. There is a disconnect now between what we're doing in terms of feeding children and that count. It's not as tightly connected as it once was during normal years. All right. So I know what you're getting at, and we can talk offline about that a little bit more, but that is not going to be a driver of entitlement grants like it has been in the past, because of 100%, we're giving, food to 100% of our children now.
Okay, because my concern is just that it wouldn't reflect in our percentage, and then we wouldn't get the funding that we would normally get when we're seeing the increase every year. However, in a year where we're offering resources to all families because it's very much needed, we wouldn't have the documentation to be able to get the funding for the following year. So that was my question, and thank you.
Thanks. Good
Thanks.
discussion.
John.
Yeah, Patrick, you touched on it, and we did actually, touch on it also in the budget subcommittee meeting as well. But I would, obviously prefer it. I'm sure you would as well. If the funding does come in with Chapter 70, that we, leave the special ed stabilization fund alone. With that said, it is a mechanism that we have used in the past, so I don't want to concern parents at home if it does end up being used, that it's not unprecedented. But with that said, both regionally, we've spoken about that at the Cape Cod Collaborative about potential uptick and a need for resources once everything's back online, and some of the students that have been home and working in that environment, then when they're back into school, may need, we want to be prepared. That ideally at this time, if it could be avoided to be touch that special education stabilization fund, that would be preferred. Thank you.
Yep. Agreed.
I thought I saw someone else. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Patrick, a question on, John Bruce brought it up about this Chapter 70, and also you mentioned the town funding increases as possibilities. Do we have a timeline on that? And I realize with Chapter 70, we probably do not, but I have to ask that ridiculous question anyway.
No, that's fine. So as I had mentioned, the state budget cycle typically starts on the last week of January with the governor's budget and House 1. And then the Massachusetts House of Representatives works on their budget, the Senate works on their budget, and there's some reconciliation, and you get a budget in the best of years. You get a state budget by June. You get some general indications what they agree upon in terms of Chapter 70 funding by April or May. this isn't the best of years. So
Mhm.
I don't think if they follow that timeline, that's extraordinary. If not, it's expected. The good news that has been coming out literally within the last weeks is that the revenue expectations, the revenue estimates for the state budget that they're building the state budget on is a revenue growth of 3.5%, which is entirely a different story than what we were beginning to hear in May and June of last year of overall revenue declines of 5 to 15%. So I'm really enjoying hearing some of the good news.
And,
Thanks,
and
Patrick.
a follow up to that, Patrick, is I know you mentioned the grants are probably going to be stable in the title areas.
Yep.
But one of the questions I have is something that doesn't come up too often is the IDEA funding. Does that
Yep.
increase or does that pretty much remain flat? Because that's obviously critical to our special needs
Yeah,
kids.
it's huge. Yeah, the 240, the IDEA grants are included. And the expectation is that those grants are going to be remaining stable too. So I think, I think we have some folks in leadership that are pretty focused and understand what those various special ed and entitlement grants mean to public school districts across the country and how important they are and what they do for kids. So it does feel like that they're going to be sustained at minimum.
And last but not least, thank you for feeding kids.
Yeah.
I just think that's fantastic because there's so many
Yeah.
people that are short on food
Yeah.
that need
If
this.
anybody say, yeah, I
And there's
gotta,
I just, hats off to everybody involved with the food service and how we're providing.
two names, Andrea Burns, Director of Food Services, and Greg Kennedy, our Transportation Director, have been doing fantastic work since March on this stuff. So
Thank you.
Any other questions for Patrick? I just had, I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but, so you mentioned that you were somewhat relieved to hear 1.5% from the town when, it could have been a 0. We just didn't know what to expect. But we're presenting a budget that is 2.49%. And I just want to make sure that for people, that they can understand the difference between those things. 1.5% means cutting a lot of stuff. And in a year when the needs are even more, especially when, as you showed on that pie chart, our whole budget is people.
Yeah.
It is all salaries, except for the little other pieces. And when we already know that our contractual obligations are 2.5%, 1.5% from the town doesn't get us very far, especially when we know that, kids are going to need so much more next year. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't seem like we're asking for so much more than, because it's really going to be it's still going to be really tight. It's still going to be
Yes.
tight.
that's 100% accurate.
It's going to be really tight to meet everybody's, to keep everybody that is working for us and keep all the kids, with what they need. Leah.
That actually, that segues very well into my second question was around this 2.49%. Is that about level programming? Like, would we say that maintains us?
Based upon our enrollment. Yeah. What our
Okay.
expected enrollment for next year. Yes.
So that's keeping us at the level that we are and not growing any areas really. Is that right? Yeah.
That is
Okay.
accurate.
Thank you.
Which, a year ago, we were talking about growing. We were talking about needing more adjustment counselors. We were talking about Portuguese language. We were, we had big plans. So, I don't want to give up on those either. It's more of a delay than giving up, I hope.
Yeah.
We don't want to lose
That's
those
a
things.
great way to think about it. Let's get through next year, and then we can revisit the big plans that we had and figure out strategies to move those forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Appreciate it. And Scott, nice to have you join us again. We have our regular COVID-19 update. You have new news for us.
Well, I apologize tonight. I feel about as sharp as a bowling ball after the last week. Yeah, so I'll give you an update. It's just been a tough couple of weeks, a tough couple of days for the health agents, because I don't know if you heard the Governor Baker saying that they were going to open up vaccines to those over 75. However, the governor has not provided vaccines in order to execute 75. So what do you think that happens to the population of Falmouth over 75? So
Did you get a few phone calls?
To give you perspective, Barnstable County set up a call center with a 774 number, and as of 1 o'clock this afternoon, in one day, had over 1,200 calls. So we're getting our fair share. So there's a lot going on right now, 10 times what was going on before. So let me give you an update. I only have 4 slides. I'm sorry, I didn't have a ton
No,
of
that's
time.
fine. We won't keep you. I feel like
No, it's okay. I know. I just, in case I'm like losing you a little bit. it's just
Not
like
at all.
I just had my Board of Health meeting talking 2 hours about a tobacco reg. So that kind of minutia gets me a headache. So here we are. Okay, you can see that we've had a bad couple of weeks up at the top. I mean, 90 to 110 cases for us is hideous. It's not what we want to see. It's really high. Generally speaking, and I'll talk about the rest of us, it's still less than what we're seeing elsewhere, but for us, it was high. Perhaps some good news. Okay, I take the number that I take is about 6 o'clock roughly every Thursday. So I'm consistent. I'm not pulling it Wednesday one week and then pulling it the different week. So I'm pulling it Thursday night to make the charts ready for my FCTV on Friday. And you can see that for this week, with 2 days left, we're at 54. So you can see it's slightly on the lower scale. The last couple of days haven't been nearly as bad. We were hot up until the mid-late last week. Now, what happens in the future, I can't predict. I wish I could. Our case count's at 1,017, and we're 54 for this week. It's all small issues for the most part. It's not a nursing home. If you look back around the 1211, 1225, 18 dots, they did have a high percentage of long-term care. These are more, there are some small clusters with some businesses, treatment center, but mainly it's small community, family type of things. We've had our fair share of that this week, over the last few weeks. Again, just to remind everybody what the color chart means, 43 cases, obviously we're blown through that over a 2-week time frame. And it's whether you hit 5% positivity or not, based on the number of tests, determines whether you're yellow and the competitive human in me is really upset because we were probably one. I could not find another town of our size that had not already hit red. So I think we went as long as we possibly could not hitting red. And the competitive guy in me was like, I was so mad to hit red. Every Thursday morning trying to read this chart to make sure we haven't hit red yet. But I hadn't found a town over 10, 15,000 that at least had not hit red. Most of the county is red. Most of the state is red. We've had the misfortune of going red because we had a couple of weeks of high cases. And the number of tests is a little bit lower because some people are going in for the antigen test, which doesn't show up in this data, but the percentages are relatively close, right? So it's what the kind of test you have isn't going to determine your the rate at which it's going to turn positive. So for us, we didn't have a great couple of weeks. Our positivity is still 10 per 100,000 better than the county, and our positivity rate percentage was a full percentage lower. We were still a full percentage lower than the state, and about 40% better than the state average. So again, Falmouth is throughout the pandemic has done better than average. I consider Falmouth to be very close to a small city. We have a lot of different. We're not very. We have very wealthy. We have not wealthy. We have businesses. We have a very thriving businesses. We have a lot of things and a lot of moving parts. We're not just a rural community out in the middle of Western Mass, and we're not the city of New Bedford or anything of that nature. But we're somewhere where I think for us and a lot of moving parts in Falmouth, we've done for the most part much better than average. So everybody who's listening, give themselves a round of applause because it's not me. It's what people do in their own personal lives. So that's my update on cases. And I think I'll give you a quick update on the vaccine, right? Because there are, it does affect teachers do fall into this. So let's talk about this. Unfortunately for health agents, and we had some teary-eyed health agents on a call today because um, as we've been going through the calls twice a week with the state, they've been asking us, focus on phase one, let us know your capacity to do phase two. And it was sort of not light and casual, but much more light and casual than the governor come in Monday morning, slam the fist down and say anybody over 75 can start registering. That's a check in which he cannot cash because we currently do not have the vaccine capacity to start doing 75 and older. So we're still finishing up, that the back half of phase one. And this is not a Falmouth. This is not me speaking as Falmouth. This is me speaking as the entire Massachusetts, all the health agents in Massachusetts, not just Falmouth. But he did change it. And if you notice, 75 and older become the first grouping, and the two comorbidities moved down to 65 and older jumped early education, public health workers, sanitation. Um, that in some regards helps me because the individuals with two comorbidities is an unknown number. The number over 75 is a known number. Knowing what you know and being able to vaccinate makes it a little bit easier. But I think I want to tell you how we're going to work on this, how this is going to work out. You're going to see mass vaccination sites. You see one at Gillette Stadium now. There will be one closer, run by the state. There's going to be we have a high throughput, and this is where I've put a lot of my time and effort, is a large throughput, relatively high throughput at the a regional site drive-through at the fairgrounds. So we'll have a high capacity drive-through clinic at the fairgrounds. And by I mean by high capacity, somewhere close to 700 cars per day. And that's pretty robust. So we're going to have that'll be a regional clinic. And obviously, how people are going to register, and this gets where it gets complicated, is an individual would register on the Where Do I Get Vaccinated website from the state. So mass.gov, where do I get vaccinated? There's a map on there, and you click on the stars, and it shows you the available time frame, and you go through and you put your information in, and you get an appointment. The problem is there's not a lot of stars on there just because you can't put a star up there and take appointments in if you don't have vaccines. The last thing you want to do is give 2,000 appointments out to somebody when you have 300 vaccines. So the clinics aren't going to look like there's a lot of openings. So when individuals tomorrow, if you're over 75 and listening to this, there's not going to be a lot of opportunity at this point because we're not stockpiled with vaccine, which is unfortunate. So it's been real tricky because where the stuff rolls downhill, right? And so the feds haven't been giving it up. The states don't have much. And Charlie just turned around, Governor Baker, and said, basically rolled it down to us to make us look like, we're not able to handle it. So we have a lot of people calling, why don't I see the clinic up and so forth? But I can't put a clinic up and show the appointment. So the state calls me up and says, well, the state's going to call Barnstable County because they're the nursing entity we're working with, and say that we've got 3,000 doses. Then we go into the software program that you register on called PrepMod. We put in a clinic for 3,000, and it shows 3,000 appointments, and the first 3,000 that grab the appointment over 75 gets it. Now, you'll be free to grab any appointment. There'll be some private sectors. The only thing you'll see in there right now is the Walgreens and Mashpee has got their star up. You'll quickly see the star go up for the clinic at the fairgrounds. There's going to be very limited doses at the beginning. It seems like it's going to trickle. Not too dissimilar from H1N1. I was here in 2009, and H1N1 was a much compressed, much quicker process, but it was very difficult at the beginning, a lot of demand, a lot of calls, and then it just sort of, the floodgates opened and we went from there. So, if you're listening to this and you're wondering when it's your turn, it'll be a lot easier as we get into March and April as the floodgates open up and we all get our groove going. There's some things I'll need from the school. For example, if I'm looking at our regional clinic and I see that that we have extra vaccine, let's say it's flowing really, really well, we're getting a lot of vaccine in, but the bottleneck happens to be the regional clinic at the fairgrounds. There's no reason why I can't corral some nurses and put on a clinic at the high school for X number of doses. Let's make up a number, 700 doses. That would be something I'd like to be able to do. But again, that's going to be vaccine dependent. If I can't have enough vaccine for the regional clinic, there makes no sense to have a supplemental clinic elsewhere. But if as it comes in, I'm trying to work that out. Another confounding issue is how do you deal with those that are homebound and those that can't make the clinic? So we also have to have a system in place, and we're working through how we're going to manage all that. So there's a lot of moving parts because we have not only do we have a lot of cases, right? So we have a lot of cases to deal with in contact trace. We also have to deal with the vaccinations. So far as education goes, there may be a need down the line based on how I see the vaccinations going and the supply of vaccine to utilize a walk-in maybe at the high school at some point, but that may or may not be based on what I get for flow. And the second thing would be early education in K through 12 have been bumped to third in phase 2. So you're going to look at some time in, I don't know, March, early April before you'd be at that point, maybe, it all depends. But I just want to be upfront with where we are with the vaccines. And, I do my FCTV. It'll be mainly vaccine focused to try to head off the volume of calls, because I can get less work done the more time the phone rings, if that makes sense, right? The more we're eating up staff answering the same questions and over. So there's a lot of moving parts and how it's going to work and how we're going to get people that don't have a computer get registered on the computer, because that's really the only way to do it. It's the state's vaccine, and they make the rules, and we have to play by those rules, and that's what the rules are. So that's my update. Sorry to sound really angry, but it's been a very long day with this.
No, thank you very much. We always
you, Scott.
appreciate it. Does anybody
Yeah.
have any questions for Scott today? Melissa?
Hi, Scott. I see you're tired. Thank you for everything you're doing. I know that it's exhausting. If you,
Hold on
We're-
one sec. My daughter's driving in the snow for the first time and she's calling. Let me make sure
Okay.
she's okay.
yeah,
So I have a question for Lori. So, in an effort to try and get the information about the schedule, like that blue sheet that
Okay.
Scott just had up, in an effort to sort of get that information out to families, I mean, we have a direct line to so many families. Is that something that we can share with them, to try and alleviate the backlog that he's seeing? If we could at least get people to know what that timeline is or where they fall, and then
Yeah.
have the information for that site on the back so they know, okay, I go to the DPH or whatever it is, MassGov site, and I click on my star or whatever.
Yeah, we can link that all up together. It's the problem is, to be honest with you, the rules seem to change every 48 hours.
That
planning
doesn't help.
these things, it takes literally, I've got a good 100 hours into this clinic. I mean, I've got the DPW building roads over at the fairgrounds. You got to deliver hundreds of cones. I've got to get a detail out there so I have EMS there all day long. I want to run this clinic 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Well, at 9 nurses each time, that's a boatload of nurses that have to come in, with some of them being volunteers. So it's quite a monumental effort on it. And the other thing is, the other hard part is I don't know, all of the private sector, they're not all up there and registered. I don't know if the private sector, the pharmacies, the Convenient MD, Dr. Lee, whoever is going to be able to do 50 here, 50 there. And I can know that and throw that into my numbers. Guess how many people we have over the age of 75 in Falmouth? Anybody
all
want
of
to guess?
them.
4,500. Well, that's a lot. I'm on these calls with Eastham, and they don't even have 4,500 people, and they're freaking out about their clinic. And I'm like, we got 45 over 75. We have another 5,000 or 6,000 over 65. So that's a lot up front. So we're doing a lot up front when it's usually these types of things are clunky at the beginning, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So it's a kind of a tsunami.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
No, Melissa, yeah, I didn't forget you.
It's okay. So if you had nurses in town that were willing to help and give their time, is there a website, or should they just email you, or
No, I
help us help you?
I farmed that out. So let me call it up because I don't have it memorized. But the MRC is the Medical Reserve Corps, and the MRC is Diana Gamond, and her phone number is, I'll give you both. So Diana is Diana.Gamond, which is Gaumond. Actually, I'll share screen, and then it's show right up, and that would be the smarter way to do it. Do have a couple brain cells left. You can see Diana's information up. You see it up there on the screen?
We do.
So
Thanks.
Diana, so that would be, we've got over 300, right? but what ends up happening is that's a big grind even on those volunteers, because the county is going to be running 4 simultaneous clinics, a couple down Cape, 1 mid Cape, and 1 at the fairgrounds. So, whether people continue to go on, because it's going to be a little on the cold side inside the barn, right? So we have to figure out sort of keeping people warm and comfortable so they're not dropping out of the volunteer. There's also need to be volunteers to walk and check the cars, because we want to hold people for 15 to 30 minutes after the vaccine in their cars. So we need to have medical services there. So just to run that clinic is a lot of work to get 600 or 700 done a day, and then, I'm thinking if I need to supplement the high school, that would be more of a walk-in. I can do a lot more with a lot less people on a walk-in. It takes a lot more people, details, police officers. If you think about the high school, when you have voting from precinct, I believe it's 5 and 6 there or something like that, there's probably a couple thousand walk through there all day long, and it doesn't look like it's a big mob other than those holding the signs. So, but it doesn't look like much. So you can kind of bring in people into sort of that kind of clinic on a walk-in basis much easier and need much less resources. And I'll do it if I've got the ability to do it, meaning I've got the nurses lined up and I've got the vaccine. But
Melissa, go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, so you're not personally hiring
Oh,
the
sorry.
nurses
Yes.
and the volunteers, it's all filtering through the MRC, Diana Gama.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that way I can go
Okay.
call Diana and there's a vetting process. So if you can't tell me I'm a brain surgeon, we give you, something to go out to do brain surgery. So there's a vetting process on that, right? So
Yeah,
and
to check,
then
yeah.
she's also taking non-medical as well. And then Diana would be able to schedule that. So what I would do is just go to Diana and say, I want to run a clinic at the high school on a Saturday. Can you give me 5 nurses and 500 doses? And I go to Deidre at the county health nurse, get the doses, get it lined up.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where you would go to volunteer.
Very good.
And there's
Andrea.
about
Oh.
30 to 40 paid nurses as well that'll be in there. And we're taking students and anybody who knows how to give a needle.
Andrea,
If
go
it was-
ahead. What was
If
yours?
it was a pill, I'd just drop it at the Walmart parking lot from helicopter and tell you all offended for yourself. I'm just kidding.
Scott, you were talking about the impossibility right now of putting up the request for appointments, because if you don't have all the other details in place, there's no point in doing that. But I'm thinking about trying to get our faculty and staff vaccinated. And is there anything that we could be doing on our end to get things organized so that when you're ready and you get to that tier, that we can be ready to go?
Yeah, it's a good question. So how I envision it, subject to change on a moment's notice, is that at the beginning, it's all about the individual registering themselves. That's how the system the state set up. That's how PrepMod works. If you want to take a look at it tonight, you can go on How Do I Get My Vaccine? And you can get on there. It won't let you register because you don't fit in the category. Or maybe you do. And you could actually look around and do it. So, but I can see as the vaccines loosen up, the rules will loosen up, and I'll be able to I'm allowed under PrepMod to do a private clinic. So I could click and set up a private clinic, but it's really going to be dose dependent. But can I say there right now that I can pull off the fact of making a private clinic just for staff? I like to be able to think I can, but we're not just at that point now. Right now, I really got to find and get together with the homebound, and a lot of our 75-year-olds are homebound. And so right now I'm putting one thing at a time. If I had, I happen to have lost my assistant, she gave her notice. So it's just Scott and Kathy working on COVID. So it gets kind of tough to do it. But it wouldn't be a big deal for me to do a private one if I can get the nurses and the vaccine. You take care of the scheduling and we do something on the weekend. I can see us doing that. And I like to be able to tell you, we'll do that. And I want to be able to do that, if that answers your question. I'm just at the constraints. Me committing to it now when I'm getting dribs and drabs of vaccine scares me a little bit to be able to promise you that I can do that.
No,
It's fair enough that you're, it's fair enough to know
That
you're
is-
even
that is-
thinking about
That
it.
is my intent, because it gets 500 people away from the drive-through clinic and it opens it up. And I can use your resources and your scheduling and your capacity to just get the bodies there. All I got to do is show up with 3 nurses and some shots.
Leah, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand.
Yeah. So actually there's 3 words that are coming to mind with this. So flexibility, which has been COVID the whole time, right? We need to be flexible. So when hearing that, it might be that you get a good batch of vaccines and we need people to be on call to be ready. So, and that goes to Andrea's point about how can we get staff ready for something like that might happen. So one question I have is I actually went and saw that there's the attestation statement, but from what I understand is not until February can you actually fill it out for phase 2. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
But we are February next week.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's
So,
not that long.
so like I can't go on there and fill it out as a public school employee right now. However, I could do it next week. My question is, do all of our staff members have to do that for phase 2?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that's a way that we could help prepare our faculty. Is that one thing I was thinking in my line of work was to make a video on how to do that. So staff know how to do that and can go and do that more efficiently. Because there's just a couple of steps of knowing.
It's called,
Yes.
we call it clunky. It's very clunky. I'm not happy about it. I wish we didn't have to put our insurance information in and all that fun stuff. It is clunky.
Yeah. So I don't know, Scott, does that seem like maybe something that would make it go a little bit smoother with this big
Yeah.
number that you might have of staff
Well,
members?
but how I would do that, I guess how I'm visioning it, subject to change in a moment's notice. That's my caveat.
Mhm.
Is that when I click on the private clinic, we can import all that. You would go to that particular private clinic and be able to do it.
Yeah,
when it
but we
becomes
would
that
need the
phase.
staff to
Yeah, I
first.
think what I'm
fill
trying
out-
to say is
yeah.
next week you can't fill all that out and put it yourself. If you put yourself on a waiting list, it gets kind of, so you wouldn't do it next week,
Okay.
right? Because you wouldn't do it next week. You'd probably do it. So how this works is right now when you went on that website, you're not seeing the gold colored star for this clinic coming up, right? It's until Deidre at the county gets a commitment from the state and then sets up a clinic for X number of doses that she just got approved from the state for. She'll run it, open it, it'll show up. People, unfortunately, if you're listening to me, if anybody's on this call, you're going to eventually, what you're going to have to do is just keep checking it. It's almost like registering your kid for summer camp at the rec center. If anybody's tried to go through that, that is a absolute nightmare in the old days, right? It's kind of be like that for you every day. It's going to be first come, first serve, and clinics are going to pop in. So that clinic is eventually going to pop in, and then the few hundred people, let's say there's 100 doses there. I'm making it up. I don't know exactly what we're going to have. Then that first 100 people that happen to see it will register for it. That's how the system's set up. I'd have to would set it up private so no one else could see it in order for it just to be for that. And we can do that, I think. It's got that functionality in PrepMod to make a private clinic. I just have to go to Deidre to see if there's enough doses for roughly about 500 staff members that you have. Let's say 350 want it. And Deidre, can I run a clinic 2 Saturdays from now at the high school for 350 in a private clinic? Then I would give you the link to the private clinic and you would start your registration then. That's how I envision it. And actually it's so you wouldn't need to do anything now. It's going to be when the availability is there in that phase.
Okay, so even that form with the state, we wouldn't.
You would go to that same site.
Mhm.
You would find the private clinic. I guess I don't know how that exactly would work, but you would find the private clinic that was just open to you. It might be a separate link, but pre-registering now for something down the line isn't going to do you any good. The only way you're going to be able to register is if there's an available appointment for you.
Okay, so
So
even filling out that attestation form with the state
it's too
wouldn't
early.
help. Okay. Okay.
But it's not too early for you to get your mind wrapped around it.
Mhm.
Okay, it's not too early for you to get your mind wrapped around PrepMod, learn on it, and go from there.
So maybe the video piece, Leah, like you were mentioning, or the tool, like whatever it is going to help people understand how to fill that out. Maybe that's the piece that happens early. And then if we get the word from Scott, then, then we'll be ready to push it out.
I mean, I want to give everybody the shot tomorrow. First off, it's just, you got to remember you're doubling all this effort because the state has to turn around and guarantee a vaccine the 21 or 28 days later for everybody who gets in the first appointment. So then Deidre, the nurse, has to figure out are these are second doses coming in, and these particular people have to come back. It's really, really a difficult process. At least the way we're set up. We're a fractured healthcare system, so it's everybody's. There's so many different ways to Sunday that everything works.
So Scott, my other two words were access and equity, and I think you were really talking about that as with the 75 plus group. That's going to be our first tier for
Yeah.
phase 2. That many of them might not be able to go on the computer and fill out all this information, and then might not be able to get in a car to go to the location, might not have a vehicle, might not be able to drive. So what's happening for that?
That's actually that's actually much harder than running a mass clinic. So what I've done is I've taken counsel on Aging. You guys know Jill Bishop, right, from the senior center, and everybody probably knows Susie Hotman from Human Services. I have to pawn some of this work off. So I'm having Susie, my nurse, and the three of them get together and identify those groups and deal with it. So my order number. Okay, so there might be a way that people are going to start calling and say, Falmouth hasn't ordered any vaccine because my order number does not sit with Barnstable County. Barnstable County is going to order the vaccines for us. But I do have the number sitting with the VNA right now, and I'm trying to work out maybe with the VNA's role in this being to do the smaller populations. I call special populations, just different groups of people that can't. But there's a big deal with doing it because the homebound, you're required to sit there and watch that person at their home for that period of time for a potential, anaphylaxis. So it is, very, very complicated. And there is just, I still, the VNA has to commit to that. If not, then what I might have to do is do the MRC, order it myself, store it myself, and then have the MRC come down and do it. Well, if it's Pfizer, then I've got to use HUI's or MBL's deep freezer, or I go Cape Cod Health. So just getting the vaccine is a monumental thing. And I don't know if I told you before, but this vaccine, once it's thawed, is the opposite of a James Bond martini. It does not like to be shaken, nor does it like to be stirred. You really have to be careful with this vaccine. You just can't have it in the back of your trunk thawed. There's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to work through. But yes, definitely want to take care of all the population. It's just, getting there is still up for grabs on exactly how that's going to work. Now, someone who's homebound is actually generally at a lower risk because their exposure to other people is a lot less. But still, if they fall in the category, they shouldn't be treated any differently than somebody who's got a car. It's just getting to them is not easy.
And it does seem that this first tier of phase 2 is a whole new experience than phase 1, because phase 1 were really our first responders and our healthcare, where they could just get their vaccine in really their workplace or in a place that was organized by their work. So now it's going to this community level of how do we support some of our most vulnerable community members.
And we're starting with that group, right? And we're starting with the hardest group to deal with at a very high population in our town, and that's the hard part. Yes.
So however we can help, in this process, because if our community is safe, our schools are safe, right? So
we'll get there.
So yeah,
it's just when the governor said, we're going to change it all, we're going to just shuffle the deck. It's like you can't keep doing that to us because we're planning one way and thinking a certain way. I thought we were told the week before that would be sometime mid-February before we started phase 2, which gave me a couple more weeks with Jill and Susie to figure that out. It gave me another week because, there's some structural things we have to do to the fairground. So we have to bump everything up and be ready. And then to tell us that, if you're going to tell me that, then there should be a FedEx box on my desk with 1 million doses, but I would think, but that's not how it works.
Maybe tomorrow.
Luckily, they're not coming to me because those are a bear to handle.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts of doing the best we can. It's just, every town's kind of fending for themselves, and it makes it, we meet a lot, but every town is doing it a little bit differently. Some towns are better set up. Some towns are able to use different staff. unfortunately, right now we don't have a nursing department. Some towns have nursing departments like Barnstable, right? So, it's been
Well,
fun
Scott,
times.
oh, go ahead, John, sorry.
Scott, if you could indulge us, we're on the level now, and I know it's repetitious because you've probably said it 1,000 times. But if you could indulge us, I mean, we're talking vaccines and whatnot, and vaccination and stations and setups of which is sort of like junior and senior level discussion, but very important with where we're at now, even though it's repetitive, to remember the elementary school and middle school, if you will, metaphor of the basic steps of preventing the spread of COVID. So could you indulge us with a public service announcement of like wearing masks and things of that nature, because it has much more of a credence coming from you. I'd greatly appreciate that.
You want me to do it right now? Sure. Social
Yes,
distancing,
please.
social and distancing and masks work. If you don't, the more risk you take, the more. The basic thing I tell everyone, and I say it on my FCTV, is think about the things we did in the spring. I mean, think about the things you did in the spring. A lot of people stop doing that. Yeah, they'll flip the mask on. Maybe it'll be on their nose, but they're going to go to 12 different places today. Well, every time you're at a place, and every time you have something, and every time you interact, you increase your risk. So you just got to do the things and just bear down to the things that we did in the spring when you're out doing your stuff. And start just doing the basics: the hand washing, hand sanitizing, wearing masks, limiting your exposure, when you go, if you're going to a friend's house and doing the things that you may not, and the gatherings and the things like that's usually where the cases come from. It still comes from my circle of friends went from, let's say your circle of friends went from 5 people in last spring. Summer you got 10 or 15, and now you're kind of mingling with 20 different people, but nah, I don't wear masks because I see them all the time. You've just increased your risk from 20, from 20 to, from 5 people to 30, 5-fold or 6-fold, by expanding that. So you have to, just for the next couple months, think about shrinking that back down and the things that you do. Does that
Thank
make
you very
sense?
much, Scott. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, everybody knows to wear a mask. I very rarely see people not wearing a mask around, I have to say, especially in Falmouth. So, I
True.
mean, we do a good job with the masks. And I'll give you another one. Wear a decent mask. I hate it. Just if you're inside, I happen to, when I run outside, I run the bike path, I use a neck gaiter because I think there's just very little to no risk at a bike path outside with a wind blowing. But when I'm inside, I wear a really nice mask. I don't have it with me. Yeah, I do. See, it's got a little. I'm going to do a demonstration for you, John. This mask here has inside of it, I got 4 of these for $10. It's got a 2.5 micron. So that's like an N95 sleeve that I replace. It comes with 10 of them and I slide it in there. So get a decent mask. That kind of can help you. These things that are made out of, think about the mask as a soccer net, and you're trying to stop peas with it. So the thinner you can get that mesh, the better you can get the mesh, the better. And so get a decent mask.
Thanks,
The blue
Scott.
ones are good.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you very
sorry.
much.
Yeah.
Oh, don't be. This is this sort of, like the teams are going to the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks, and they're all still practicing basic tackling techniques and whatnot. This is the stuff that will actually save lives. So thank you.
Thanks,
And
Scott. I know you're super busy, but we always appreciate you coming.
And
And
one other thing, if you're under
yeah.
30, and if you're under 30 and you get a little scratchy throat and the sniffles, that could be COVID, right? So, some people think sometimes it does happen. We are hearing, a lot of people that have mild symptoms, and so mild symptoms might still be it. So most people do have mild symptoms with this. I think we forget that, especially if you're under 50, you tend to get milder symptoms, and people are walking wounded out there and not getting tested. So that's the other thing.
Thanks, Scott.
Nothing
Thanks.
else? We're good?
I think we're good. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Good luck with the clinic.
Did you need me on for any other part, Lori?
No, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Parkinson to see if he wants to add anything or share anything.
I'll stay gone.
But thank you,
Seen the
Scott.
Thanks,
Mainly
Scott.
just if I find any peas in a soccer net, I'll know where to come looking. But we're seeing at the practice level, what Scott showed in the graphs. There is an increase in the number of of cases, but at the same time, you know, if you look at the number of cases statewide, it has come down from the peak, you know, the post-Christmas peak. We're now down to the Thanksgiving level, which is still, you know, thousands of cases, but hopefully the trend is going to go down. And, you know, I've been talking all fall and into the winter about the storm and what the weather is outside is going to determine what happens, you know, within the schools and within our homes. And, you know, we're in the heart of the storm right now. And hopefully we're just on the first step out of the heart. I think that, you know, the middle of January was when we all knew it was going to, you know, hit. And so we just have to, you know, fend off that fatigue and keep doing the right thing. And we're going to get there. You know, to reinforce what Scott said about mild symptoms, you know, what we tell people is that, you know, pre-COVID, we would call it a cold. You know, since last year, you check for COVID, and then if it's negative, you call it a cold. And that's really important to prevent spread, because the people that are the most dangerous are the ones that they don't know they have it. And so it's just very important to treat it like COVID until it's proven that it's not. That's really all I wanted to add.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Greg. Sorry. Lori, did you have an update as well?
Yes, around the COVID, just briefly, I would like to say, based on, you know, what we've heard and what Dr. Parkinson just said, I am really proud of our staff and our families. You know, we keep track of everyone that, not just the positives and the close contacts or exposures and such, but those that have symptoms. And I am so proud of our families that really are keeping our students home with very mild symptoms and call into our public health nurse. And so we're able to keep track of that. And it gives her a chance to talk to the families. And so in that regard, I think it's working very well. And I just thank everybody and keep that up. I think it is, all of these mitigating strategies are helping our schools because, you know, we really don't have the evidence in the school that there's any spread in the school. I gave a 2-week update last week, and you know, our numbers were higher of the positive cases, but the majority of those cases were never in school. So the parents were keeping them home, and some were remote, but we're making good choices. And the ones that, you know, happen to be in school when they found out that they're positive, I just want to remind people that, yes, we are over quarantining. We're taking that abundance of caution approach. We're not just quarantining the student that is sitting in front and behind and beside. We are quarantining the entire cohort. So, you know, on the dashboard, you know, yes, the quarantine numbers look very high, but that's because we're taking that extra caution. Scott, Greg, Joan, myself, Lori Wiesman, our lead nurse and our public health nurse, meet every Friday morning, and we talk through the cases. And, you know, we just talked about the buses. When we have to quarantine buses, some districts are only quarantining you know, the bus driver if it's the first 6 rows, but we're taking that extra caution. If we're quarantining the bus, then, you know, the driver goes too. So we're taking a lot of extra steps. We know it's you know, kind of above and beyond, even what the science is, but the schools have been safe. We have no evidence of that transmission within the schools. I know that we just went to red, and Scott just reported that. I don't know how we held out for as long as we did with all the red that was around us. And districts have been in red for, you know, quite some time, especially the majority of the Cape has been in red for the last 3 weeks. Now we're in red. As the state has guided us, we should be in red more than 3 weeks before we start considering any other choice. But in those other choices, our team that meets on Friday will continue to discuss what the spread is in the town. And the bigger decision is, and to look at those details, is there transmission within the schools? Because even if there is community spread and our numbers are high, if we're not seeing it at the school, then we're safe to be in school. And in fact, when you look at the number of students that are remote, we're not seeing that positive students, at any high rate in the buildings. So it's much higher out, which, gives us all the indicator that schools are a safe place to be. So just wanted to say that, and then also to say that we are planning forward with in our weekly meetings. We're thinking beyond the vaccine. We are planning for the vaccine for our staff, but we are planning beyond that, and what can schools look like this spring, and certainly next fall. But even if, could we have some different options this spring for our students, and having opportunities for more students to return to school. The advisory is looking at that. Certainly my admin team, and we're looking at the guidance. We're looking at new data that's coming out of CDC, and we're putting all that together, and we're staying on top. So I just kind of wanted to let everyone know that we are looking forward to options, as well as looking at the here and now today. So that's my COVID update. I have some non-COVID things, but Scott, I saw your hand go up.
I just want to add the best thing, still to this day, I've made way too many in the last year important decisions. And the best decision I have still made was to convince Lori and everybody to hire Jennifer to do your COVID work. It's still the best decision I've made, because a lot of towns are struggling with this part because they're calling the health department, and the health department's trying to figure it out. And now the county is trying to help towns with that, but the county is also trying to vaccinate. So it gets real complicated. So it's still the best decision I have made since doing this. And still, I promise everybody, the first thing that Kathy, my nurse, and I do, still with all the COVID trying to get the vaccine, is still look at every case to see if it's a 15-year-old or a 92-year-old. Okay, so the first thing we do is look at the case. Is it a student? And we send it off to Jen. That hasn't changed, because that's still the priority. I think that, and the over-aggression of the aggressive quarantining, or whatever term you want to use, is what's kept the schools in as good a shape as they are. Just felt like adding that's still the best call I've made.
And as busy as Scott has been, he still takes my calls at any point during the day. So so I appreciate it. Yep.
Could I just want to make the committee aware of one thing, that in case it's brought to your attention, and I think it's good for the people that are listening in to know as well, is when a student does have COVID, there has been a change if they're an athlete in terms of how they're handled. There's been some evidence come out in the last month or two that there can be some after effects, especially in students who have had more serious infections, but even some of the minor ones, as to whether there can be any residual cardiac effects. And because of that, the guidance has come out from the American Academy of Pediatrics that we should be doing a return to play protocol with students in the same way that it's done with concussions now. And so I just want people to know that if you are a student athlete and you have COVID, there's the 10 days that you have to isolate, but after that, there's going to be a minimum of 5 to 7 days of gradual, looking at your conditioning, making sure that you actually can tolerate the exercise. And we're all aware of the older adults who feel like they've been set back for extended periods of time. And so this is just one of those abundance of caution things in the kids. Just so that coaches, trainers, and or nurses don't, have to hear a lot of grief, so that people know that that's out there.
I think that's an important point too, right? We're constantly learning, when you have more data and you're learning new things, But, Dr. Parkinson brought that information to us last week, and we immediately put it into policy, wrote it up and got it out to all of our current athletes, and that will be a practice moving forward. So we immediately put that into place for our students, because safety always comes first.
That's great. I did not know that. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Dr. Parkinson. I think, are we COVIDed out for tonight? I think we've covered everything. So thank you guys for joining us again. And Lori, did you say you have other updates as well?
Just a few happy
Thank
updates
you.
I'd like to give. Thanks, Dr. Parkinson. Thanks,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Oh,
All right.
Thank you.
Be strong, Scott.
All right, so some happy updates. Well, first, I just want to say that the next week coming up is School Counselors Appreciation Week. So we certainly appreciate our counselors and everything they've done. So be sure to say thank you to your counselor. A couple of things. We have another donation that went direct to kids' meal. It was $2,500. It was the Moores Group that participated in the polar plunge. So we appreciate that. We appreciate all the donations, and it's just amazing, the people that know how valuable it is that our students can have these additional meals for them. So thank you to the Moores Group. Mid-Cape Home Centers picked up 28 boxes of food in Hyannis from the Farmers to Families program, and delivered in their truck, brought it to us, and then we got them out to families too. So we these are boxes of fresh vegetables and milk and some fresh food that we've been able to deliver. So appreciate the Mid-Cape Home Centers jumping in and getting those boxes delivered to us. We have a big thank you to the Falmouth Road Race. Once again, we wrote a grant for some different on our wish list. And we were granted $44,710. It's covering instruments for an outdoor music program at T-Ticket, for a disc golf program at Lawrence, and the new lacrosse scoreboard at the high school. So a huge thank you again to the Road Race. They have given us, they're just phenomenal. They've given us such large grants each year, and just really appreciate that. And then the last thing I want to mention, a fun thing, our Falmouth High School Theater Company is putting on the play Clue, and it's coming up. So the dates are running Friday, February 7th, and through that Sunday. And there's several different performances. The Friday performance is at 7, the Saturday performance is at 1 and 7, and then Sunday it's February 7th, it's at 1 o'clock. This is all virtual. We'll make sure that we get the information out to the families, but we are going to do, we're going to kind of do a spectators option for a couple family members for those participating in the play, like we have done for our sporting events. So we'll have families that'll be able to watch in person, but by large, it's a virtual performance for everyone else. So we'll get the information out how people can sign up. So,
and we'll be able to sign up?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Yeah, please share that. That's,
Yes,
we're all desperate for stuff to do.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to it. It's, our kids are great, so this will be fun.
thank you. Any questions for Lori? All right, wonderful. All right, so next up is some action. So we're acting on the policies that we reviewed at the last, at our last meeting. Sonia, is there anything you wanted to add about them, or anything we should know?
Sure. Thank you, Kelly. on the policies that we shared with you, there are a couple that also have text with blue highlight. So in the interim between the first read and the policy subcommittee meeting, and then bringing this to you, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education actually have given us preliminary feedback to clarify a couple of the points so that when we go through the final review process of them, they don't come back to us and say, hey, by the way, can you update these policies yet again? So if there are any questions that the school committee has, I'd be happy to answer them, as would Dr. Woodward, whose office is overseeing this process.
Anybody have any questions for Sonia or policy? Lori, do you happen to know if we can take these all together because they're listed as one unit on our agenda? Okay, great. I was worried for a second there. Terry, go ahead.
I'm going to make a motion that we take them all together.
And approve. Can you name them?
Do I need to read them?
No, but can you just identify what they are so that it's in the minutes, and for anyone at home what they are? Just you don't have to read the whole content, but just the titles of them so people at home know what we're voting on.
The policies, school admissions, immunization of students, homeless students, enrollment rights and services, educational opportunities for children in foster care.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there a second? Natalie's quick on the draw for the second. And any last discussion on these? And go ahead, John.
So Kelly, just a clarification. So Terry's motion is that we are taking them together and approving all of the items, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for clarifying. Any discussion? And it's a roll call. Andrea? Terry?
Terry Medeiros, yes.
Natalie?
Natalie Cantalopoulos, yes.
Leah?
Leah Palmer, yes.
John?
John Fenari, yes.
Melissa?
Melissa Keith, yes.
Lisa?
Lisa Hart, yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And I'm also yes, so it passes unanimously. Thank you to policy for all the work that you guys put on that, and to Sonia too. Appreciate it. Next is conducting routine business. We have two sets of minutes. We have the January 12th meeting. Sorry, I'm scrolling. And I can't remember if this is the one. So this was the one that Sharon actually sent a new version because she caught a typo and she added to the list at the end of the accompanying documents. So it would be a motion to approve the minutes sent this afternoon. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make the motion. Yep.
Natalie and Melissa, second. Thanks. Any other catches or edits to the minutes for January the 12th? And it's a roll call vote. Andrea?
Andrea Thorold, yes.
Terry?
Terry Medeiros, yes.
Natalie?
Natalie Cantalopoulos, yes.
Leah?
Leah Palmer, yes.
John?
John Fenari, yes.
Melissa?
Melissa Keith, yes.
Lisa?
Lisa Hart, yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And Kelly Welch also yes, so those pass unanimously as well. And then the December 1st meeting minutes. So this is our goal setting meeting night. Is there
Make a motion to approve the minutes from December 1st.
Thanks,
the
Andrea.
Goal setting workshop.
And a second, Terry, thank you. Any other comments on December the 1st? Okay. And Andrea, you're first for the roll call.
Andrea Thorold, yes.
Terry?
Terry Medeiros, yes.
Natalie?
Natalie Cantalopoulos, yes.
Leah?
Leah Palmer, yes.
John?
John Fenari, yes.
Melissa?
Melissa Keith, yes.
Lisa?
Lisa Hart, yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And Kelly Welch also yes, so those pass unanimously as well. Awesome. All right, thanks guys. So report from the chair and committee member reports. I have a couple quick things. First is a huge thank you to town meeting for again supporting the schools and our capital requests. So voted last night was approval for funding for the high school secondary chiller, the Morse Pond ceiling and the T-ticket roof design. So thank you to all of you guys who voted for that, and also to the continuing support from town meeting. Also last night, town meeting date for April was announced as April the 12th. And so we usually meet that night ahead of town meeting, and that was our to be determined date. So please put that in your calendar, April the 12th, and we'll meet from 6 to 7. And who knows if it'll be in person or town meeting will be remote. It's all gonna be a surprise, who knows? And then the last thing is that I sent out a request to everyone about interest in having a second retreat. And I did hear back from more than half of the school committee that there was interest in having Khalees Warman come back again and do a training for us on microaggressions and bystander anti-racism. So I'm not sure when she's going to be available, but we will try to coordinate with her and get a date set for that for some time in the coming months when we're available and she's available. So, and that's all I have. Are there any other committee members that have stuff to announce or requests? Terry, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess this would be for future agendas. That's the proper time to say this. Okay, so there's two things. What I was wondering if we could revisit our operating protocols, because last night at town meeting, there was the article about the carousel, and I had thought about making comments and I wasn't sure. I'm thinking about number 16, which is our communicating in public protocols, about the way that I could separate from being a school committee member and a town meeting member. So I was wondering if I had a thought about a way that I saw Brett Putnam do it once when he was the selectman, and he literally walked down from the stage and you could see physical distance and said, so I was wondering if maybe we could meet and talk about adding a sentence from what he did, which would be stepping out of our role as a school committee member, because we are citizens. We have opinions about things on other committees, and if we make that statement, I mean, it's clear of our intention. So anyway, I don't know if we need to have a meeting in public, if it has to be on agenda, how we would do it, but I would just ask if we could consider adding
a way to, I think I got you. All right, I got it. And you said, I think you said two things though. What was the other one? Is that just that?
That was what my bottom line was, that we could just make a statement that we could preface with, it's an established protocol and people would understand that we're talking as regular citizens, which we are. Okay, and the other thing I was asking if people would consider a way to bring the kids back. I love the kids, I miss the kids. We haven't seen them all year. So I was brainstorming ways, and I was going to say, I would offer myself as a liaison to the schools. Like today I was reading the reports from the elementary schools, you know, the newsletters, and there's things that it would be great if a kid could explain what's going on. For example, in East Falmouth School, the kids are going to do a readathon where they're going to, if they make a certain goal, the principal's going to dye her hair blonde. So I think it would be so cool if a kid could explain that. And Teaching at School is going to have a spirit day where they wear maroon, so it would be nice to see them in maroon. And last night, Falmouth beat Mashpee in basketball. So these are all the things about kids. And rather than not just report them, I was wondering if we could get somebody to do a little 30-minute clip on their phone, send it to me. Lori, I hope you don't mind if I ask Ryan to just help me upload it into our agenda, but I mean, I'll use my own phone. And so I was wondering if it could be a subcommittee assignment or if it could be a liaison thing. And if people would consider, since it's my idea, I'll volunteer my time to do it. But it's very important to me. I miss seeing a little kid's face or a high school student's face at our meetings. And I know we can't go into the schools, but I mean, a teacher could film something or a fellow student could film something and just as a way to get their little faces, because they are our clients, the bottom line, number one, and number two. I mean, don't you miss them? I think everybody does. Anyway, so just a way to go about doing that. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Terry. And John, I think I saw your hand too.
Yeah, just a note, the Cape Cod Collaborative is hosting the Interactive Legislative Forum on Friday, February 12th at 8:30 a.m. Look forward to folks attending, and that's all. I just wanted to share that. There'll be more information to follow. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Andrea, I think you had mentioned last time that there might be something after the legislative breakfast. Is that still happening?
Yes, it is. And hopefully you guys have all gotten your invitations. Mask had sent around an email. I don't know if you're able to check those on a regular basis, but have a look out for that. It came within the last few days and it'll have more detail with the schedule.
Great, thank you. Any other updates or agenda requests? Okay, great. Oh, hold on, next page. So I make a motion, we move into executive session to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements, specifically the open meeting law, and we're going to approve minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Melissa, and it's a roll call vote. Andrea?
Andrea Thorold, yes.
Terry?
Harry Maderas, yes?
Natalie?
Natalie Cantalopoulos, yes.
Leah?
Leah Palmer, yes.
John?
John Fenari, yes.
Melissa?
Melissa Keith, yes.
Lisa?
Lisa Hart, yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And Kelly Welch also a yes, so that's unanimous, and we will not be returning following executive session. So thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. And